Hosts and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Supernatural, metaphysical, paranormal. You know, all those things you've been wondering about? Are you ready to go deeper into the realms of the unknown? I hope you've got your walking shoes on, because life is an adventure, and this is the journey. Come on, let's go. Hello and welcome to the show, everyone. This is the Journey Radio Show, and I'm Jen Cruz, your host. And hey, we're showing up as the She-Squatchers again. So I've got my trusty teammates on the line. Jenna Grover, are you there?
I am here and happy to be here.
Awesome. And Tammy Trickle. Hey, Tammy.
Hey, everybody.
Hi. So we have an awesome guest for you tonight. We've got Justin Decker joining us. He's a Bigfoot and cryptid researcher. And he's got lots of stories to share with us tonight, and I cannot wait to hear all that he has to share with us. So without any further ado, Justin, are you there?
I am here and ready to go.
Awesome, awesome. So before we get started here, I just want to say that Darla Snooki is in the chat room, and she is saying hi to both Jenna and Tammy and to me.
Hey, so Darla, how are you?
Yes. So I just wanted to give her a special little shout out.
We love Darla.
We do love Darla. And shout out to Justin too. She says hi to Justin.
Hi, Darla.
She's like our number one fan, Darla. I tell you what. So we wanted to get right to Justin and him telling us all about the stories that he has for us. And right before the show, he was telling us that he has an interesting childhood. So please, Justin, tell us all about it.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's kind of mundane, but everybody else seems to find it fascinating. I was born and raised in South America. I spent the first 9 years of my life in the Amazon rainforest in the Amazon basin. My dad and mom were missionaries down there to the natives. Held various jobs during our time down there, and just living life down there just kind of, was a whole different experience for me, but it was normal for me. So it always kind of surprises me when I do tell people some of the things that happened. For me, it was everyday life, but other people just find it fascinating. So I enjoy kind of sharing and answering questions, and just kind of letting people know what it was like where I was growing up.
That just is fascinating to me. I've never been to South America, but I've seen lots of pictures and videos, and I just can't wait to hear more about that. How exciting.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely was. Every day was an adventure. I spent half my time just literally out in the jungle playing and just experiencing everything that life had to offer for me, the animals and the climate and the natives down there. I was very good friends with many of them, and just living life to the fullest. Absolutely.
That's fascinating. Jenna, you're on mute.
I know, because I'm sitting here going, wow, oh, cool, yeah. That's kind of why I have to mute myself too. Wow, what an incredible childhood you must have had. So this is all completely normal for you, this land of beasts and oh my goodness. Wow.
So, yeah, absolutely.
What are your earliest memories of growing up there?
I remember before I was even in school, living out in the jungle with my parents. Before my memory starts, my dad was a jungle explorer. His initial job when we were down there was to contact new tribes that had never been contacted before. They would hear rumors of different groups of people, either from other Indian tribes or from locals in the jungle towns. And then his job as a team of 3 other men was to go find them in the jungle, literally modern day jungle explorers. And then my memories start at what we call the lake house, which was after he was done with the exploring part. We moved in to work with a specific tribe to learn their language and to become friends with them. And that's where my memories start in the jungle.
Wow. So do you know, sorry, wow. See, I have to mute myself again. One more thing. But do you know the different languages and did all the tribes pretty much stick with the same language or did you?
So the specific tribe that we worked with had their own unique language, unrelated to anything else down there in the area. And that's what made it so unique is my dad and his team had to go in and learn the language from scratch with no base at all. It's unlike Spanish. It was unlike anything else. The closest type of dialect they could come up with was actually something from Indochina. An Asian Chinese dialect was the closest thing they could come up with the way they had to do the phonetic spelling and everything. And I do know a few of the words, yes.
Did he keep, I mean, do you guys have that information still, or was it taken by the company he worked for?
Well, it was a completely unknown, unwritten language. They had no writing. And even to this day, the writing is very minimal. So literally, it was all learned language in my dad's head.
Okay, so he never wrote
the
it
other
down
people.
or?
They did not get to the point where they were writing it down before we had to leave. No, it was still in the translation process.
Wow. Very,
I
very
just have
cool.
one question. There must have been huge spiders.
I didn't do it.
Oh yes, I have a couple of giant spider stories in my repertoire for sure.
Wow.
One time, I'm the youngest of four. One time, my dad and my sister, who's a few years older than me, were out hunting. They were deep in the jungle, and they came around a corner, and sitting on a log was a spider, a tarantula, basically. Its body was the size of a large paper plate, so about 10 inches across. Now, we're talking the body, not the legs. Just the central body. It was black in color. It had stripes on it or splashes of color that were red and orange, and it was just sitting there. And so my dad took a look at it and then did a wide path around that log and kept on going.
Oh,
Wow.
that is oh no.
Yeah, I'm not scared of Bigfoot, but I don't do spiders.
I don't know.
Well, and for that one that you saw, there was probably about 5 other ones in that same exact
Oh, I'm
area
sure.
going, ha ha.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Ooh, all their buggy little.
I can recall a time at the school base. My school that we went to was a boarding school in a valley in the Andes Mountains. It wasn't directly in the Amazon basin, but it was in the jungles of the Andes. And surrounding the school was a banana patch, which is what we called it, basically a banana forest of cultivated bananas. Me and my friends were playing through there one day, and we were just kind of running around between the trees. And I turned a corner and came face to face with a giant spider web spread across the trail. Now, I can't say how big it was because I was young and this thing was directly in my face, but it appeared to be larger than my face. It was white, spindly legged, kind of like a regular spider would be, and it had green and orange splashes of color on it. And I just turned around and took off the other direction because I wasn't having none of that.
Oh my goodness.
I wouldn't either. No, that would be the end of that. I'd be.
Mhm.
This is why I live where the air hurts my face in the wintertime. Those things can't live here. They can't survive here. We don't have like big reptiles that'll eat us or.
Oh, Jen,
I don't
you're
mind
funny.
Bigfoot and bears and wolves. I can handle all that, but.
Well, that's the normal creatures in your woods, and these were pretty much the normal creatures in my woods. And growing up, I left there when I was 9.5. We were taught how to interact with these animals, what the appropriate responses were, and basically just how to live. Just like living in the North Woods, you learn how to respond if you come across the bear in the woods, right? There's just certain things you do and certain things you learn, and that's how it was for us as well.
Well, that makes sense, I guess. If it's normal to you, then it's normal to you, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Before we started here, you started telling us a few things, and we were like, "Wait!" And I think Jen was saying, what are you all about? And I think that's where you started. And I'd love for you to continue because that was amazing.
Yes.
Sure, absolutely. So growing up the way I did, I always knew there was more out there than what so-called science would tell us. Just because of how I was raised. Being deep in the jungle, we saw things and experienced things that nobody else ever had, or I should say no white man had ever really experienced. Things that science say didn't exist or shouldn't be there. This was part of my normal growing up culture. And so I already knew there was so much out there already that so-called science just didn't know about. And just everyday experiences. We would find certain types of snakes. We had a water snake that was out in the jungle that was venomous. That's supposedly there was no venomous water snakes in the jungle. Different things like that. And then hearing my dad's stories of exploring the deep jungle really brought a fascination for me, especially to the topic of Bigfoot and large hairy humanoids and apes. There was the specific story that he tells. Him and his crew were traveling down a tributary of the San Bernardino River down in the jungle. They were exploring, looking for a new tribe. And they were on a boat. That's generally how they travel, just boating into the deep interior of the Amazon as far as they could. They had come around a corner, and way off in the distance, about 100, 150 yards up in the trees, they saw 3 large black monkeys. Now, what was unusual is that so far away they could see them clearly. And being their job was jungle exploration, they were very familiar with the local animals. They fed on most of them. They would hunt them for food. And my dad stated very specifically, these things were the size, at least the size of a large chimpanzee. Now,
That's pretty big.
Absolutely. Anybody that studies the New World monkeys and apes knows there is nothing that size in the jungle as far as monkeys go. Nothing at all. Nothing even comes close. So they watched them, and for a few seconds, they were up in the trees. When they caught the noise of the motor, they just took off through the trees. And what astonished the gentleman was the fact that they moved so quickly. Even for monkeys their size, they were just gone through the canopy and vanished from sight. So those are the things that really stood out to my dad, was the size and their speed. They did not fit anything at all that's supposed to be down there.
Now, I'm trying to imagine them moving through the canopy. Were they like swinging across the branches like Tarzan?
It's hard to say from the distance. I had asked my dad that exact question because I wanted to know. He said they moved like spider monkeys. Was the closest thing he could come up with. Now, to me, that means they weren't swinging as much as they were grabbing branches and pulling themselves through and basically running on all fours on the trees and just kind of going through.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, very cool. So he saw them and what did they think about that?
They just chalked it up as kind of a weird experience.
Okay.
It wasn't until years later when I started putting a lot of stuff together about Bigfoot and Bigfoot around the world, so to speak, for that story came back to my mind. And I asked my dad about it and just drilled him with as many questions as I could. And that's where it came up that, hey, this really was something very unusual and just a very unique experience for the fact that there is nothing that size living in the jungle, supposedly. And then I connected it to the Deloitte ape, which is a very controversial subject in the Bigfoot world, the cryptid world, supposedly a hoax. But it was a description of a very large creature, very similar to a spider, but about 4 foot tall, which would have been almost the exact description that my dad gave.
Okay. And I'm unfamiliar with that. Could you give us a little background on it?
Well, it is only known from a picture. And if you look it up on the internet, you'll see Deloitte's ape. It's basically what looks to be a spider monkey sitting on a crate. And the story was that it was in, I believe, the 1800s. One of the jungle explorers that was the Indians shot it and took a picture of it. And the picture has kind of circulated around. And it's one of them really old black and white photographs from very, very early days. So many people have looked at it, and it's been pretty much classified as a hoax. I know you're all familiar with Lauren Coleman. He did a big write-up on it, classifying as a hoax and saying why, all of his thoughts on it. And who am I to disagree, right? All of his points made perfect sense. All I know is that I have another report from my dad of basically the same creature.
Okay, well that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So did it basically look like a little Bigfoot?
It was too far away to get any details with it being so far up in the canopy.
Okay.
It was definitely an ape. They could not define if there was a tail or not. My dad does not recall seeing any type of tail. And if it was a creature of that size, you would think a tail would at least have been able to have been seen, even at that distance. So that was one of the things he said. He did not recall seeing any type of tail at all.
Interesting. Interesting.
Now, to further muddy the waters with it, just because that's not enough, right? The Indian tribe that we ended up settling with and working with were called the Maku tribe. Once we were able to learn enough of their language, we were able to pull a story out of they had of a creature. During the day, this creature slept in hollow trees, but it would come out at night. And if it caught anybody away from the safety of the camp and campfire at night, it would attack them and drain their blood. Now, the description is a classic Bigfoot description, just a little shorter, right? So about 5 foot tall, average man size, very hairy, long arms, and basically a Bigfoot. That if he caught an Indian away from the fire at night, he would attack them. And factoring that story, now this was in a different region of the jungle, but they had the same story again of a similar creature, same description that my dad had seen a few years earlier, tying in also with the Deloitte ape. So this is where I started coming up with the idea of, look, all these different stories, completely unrelated, but they're still tying in together with these elements.
And it was draining their blood, but not eating the meat of the people?
That was the legend. That was the story. To them, it was almost a boogeyman, almost a ghost, but still at the same time kind of flesh and blood. The Indians were kind of both very spiritual. I mean, a typical Aboriginal thought process. Their world is also reigned by spirits and spiritualism as well as the reality that they live in. So many of the creatures had their physical elements and their spiritual elements as well. And this creature kind of fell. We couldn't decide for them if it was purely a physical creature that did this or if there was more of a boogeyman that came out at night. But we think it was kind of the combination of the two. You know, a good campfire story based on a real creature.
Vampiric Bigfoots.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Now we're talking.
Right? So when did you move away from South America?
I moved when I was 9.5.
Okay.
Things were getting pretty dicey down there, given the political stances of everything going on.
Oh, wow.
A lot of upheaval, some of the civil war with the communist guerrilla groups, especially the one called FARC. And it just got too dangerous for us down there, so we ended up having to leave.
Oh, wow. But what an opportunity.
You to come back up here.
So my dad was born and raised in Upper Michigan, the Upper Peninsula. And my mom is Eastern Kentucky girl. So when we came back from South America, we ended up moving back to Upper Michigan, where my dad was from.
And how was that?
Huge culture shock for me, let me tell you, coming from the equator zone to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Yeah, but at least you weren't like in the city, like stuck in the city going, you know.
That's very true. At least I still had woods, even if it was totally different. We still had a good chunk of land, and I still was able to live in the woods up there, even if it wasn't the jungle.
Yes, that's awesome.
What did you think of snow? Oh, my goodness.
So the first time I even came to the States I was about 4.5. My parents came up to travel and visit family and friends and stuff. And I don't clearly recall this, but as the story goes, my very first experience with snow was in Upper Michigan at my grandparents' house. And I was on the porch, and I was totally done up in snow boots and snowmobile suits and bundled up like that little kid off the Christmas Story. You know, I can't put my arms down, that guy. So stepping off the porch, I fell about 4 feet into the snow because it's Upper Michigan, right? And that's what snow does up there. And I started screaming that the ground was eating me because I had no concept that I would sink into the snow. So here's this 4-year-old little kid freaking out because the ground is trying to eat him. I was further convinced because they pulled me out by my arms and my boots got left in the snow. So I was convinced the ground ate my boots, and I did not step outside again the entire winter.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. The ground ate my boots.
You guys traumatized by giant spiders. I was traumatized by snow. It's horrible.
You know, I used to play practical jokes on people sometimes, and I had a friend who moved to Minnesota from New Jersey, and so she was all excited about snow and how deep it was and whatever. And I told her she had to make sure to go get some steel-toed boots because the snow snakes will bite you.
Yes.
They're hiding in the snowbank. And she's like, what? And she I had her totally convinced. It was hilarious.
Yes, we had our snow snakes in Upper Michigan as well. Pure white with beady little red eyes, but their tactic was to jump out at you as you were driving by on a snowmobile. So that was the snow snakes
Oh.
we had in Upper Michigan. Yes.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, just to clarify, there aren't really snow snakes out
No.
there, guys, but it's a fun joke to play on people that don't know any better.
Mhm.
Oh, it's so much fun, so much fun. So you got back up to the States and you started living that upper Midwest life. And how did you get into all the cryptid stuff? Like, what kind of cryptids are you researching or interested in? What's going on?
You know, I'm really into anything 14, so anything strange and out of the ordinary, I'm into. Bigfoot for me just came naturally because of my love for the woods, my love for the jungles, the deep woods. I always felt at home when I was in the woods. I'd be away from everybody and just on my own, kick off my shoes, running barefoot through the woods. That was my home. And just it was an affinity. And so from the very first time I heard about Bigfoot, I knew he had to be out there because why would he not be? What was my thought of it? That was my logic as a young kid, you know. And then I just started reading everything I could about him. The big one for me was the BFRO database back in the 90s. And I would sit there for hours and hours and hours at night just going through the database and reading as many reports as I could and reading books. I have just a huge library of books. Most of the books I've already lost, but I've read them and I retained most of that information. Most of Lauren Coleman's books. Lauren Coleman was one of my favorite authors growing up. He really got me into the subject. I loved his approach. His style of writing was absolutely fabulous, and just kind of built up from there. I'm reading Crypto Mundo, the old blog that used to be out there with Craig Woolheater, and all those guys, and just following all the way through from my preteens, and again just reading and absorbing everything I possibly could, and living out in Upper Michigan. I always lamented the fact that, oh man, Bigfoot's only in the Pacific Northwest. He's not in my area. Then come to find out that I was totally off base with that. Unfortunately, I had already moved from Upper Michigan when I started encountering reports from the areas that I had lived in. And that just devastated me because I felt like I had missed my opportunities, you know. But then again, developing more and more in my research, it just come to find out they really are everywhere. You can't find a state in the continental U.S. where you're not going to find some activity.
I think that's true too. I think they are everywhere.
Yeah.
And isn't it funny that people don't believe still?
No, they don't. I was traveling through Georgia a couple years ago, and I stopped at the Expedition Bigfoot Museum with David that runs that, right? And I was just kind of cruising around, and I literally heard this young lady say, "Oh, you mean there's more than one?"
Oh yeah.
Right?
And
I'm sitting here going, like, you hear that people say that, but I've never actually heard somebody say that, and it blew my mind. I was like, wait a minute, there's people that really think that? I thought that was just a joke, but
Yeah.
they were serious, and it blew my mind. I can't even comprehend that. Like,
Oh, and the question continues after that. But how do they get from place to place?
yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
well, if there's there's plenty. So,
exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
for people that don't know, that's a solid question, I guess.
See, even to me, it's not a solid question because you got to go, well, that doesn't make any sense. How could there be just one? Like,
I'm
not
trying to be
even.
nice.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No.
I think, logically speaking, I think when people think Bigfoot, it's like a singular word. So they think there's one. I can see how if they're not thinking about it too hard, they could get that from a blonde moment. No offense to anybody. I've got some blonde hairs in here too somewhere. So, but sorry, Jena.
I'm good, girl. I'm good. I'm sitting here wondering if I did get blonde put in my hair this. Oh, yep, there it is. I got some blondes too.
Whoop, there it is. All right. So I know that you said you were doing a lot of reading of reports and just gathering information that way and comparing. I'm really interested to hearing some of the best reports that you've seen, or and I like the out there stories too. I love all of that. I like to collect all that.
Oh man,
What's your take on that?
So I just love reading and it fascinates me. Some of my favorite stories are habituation sites because some of the detail of behaviors and mannerisms come across, and that's what really interests me. Like I've already come to the conclusion that this is a real legitimate creature. What the creature is, I have no idea, but there's something out there, and people are experiencing this. So people that claim to have these experiences, I just really look into them. One of my favorites I came across was a family clan that lived on a property, I believe it was in northern Florida. And what fascinated me was there was like a matriarch to the family. There was the male Bigfoot, the female, the kids, but then there was an older one. Like I'm guessing the mother-in-law that he just couldn't get rid of. I don't know, but that's what it sounded like to me. And the description was she was white and she was old. And I know there's a lot of question brought up about coloration. Do Bigfoot get white as they age, or is that just a different color phase? And according to this story, it seemed to be more of the fact it was an aging thing. And so that story really fascinated me in the different aspects of it. I really like the stories that give details. Yeah, one walked across the road. Okay, I mean that's a cool story, but give me something to work with. Give me some activity. Give me ones. I heard a story. There was a canoe race. I got this one from my friend Jeremiah. There was a canoe race. Native Americans were doing a canoe race in northern New York, and apparently there was a couple of these creatures up on a cliff, and they were disturbed by the noise of the canoe race, so they started throwing boulders at the racers down below. And one of the details that caught me was when they were talking about these boulders coming down, I'm going, yeah, they could just be falling off the cliff, right? Boulders fall. But the detail was these rocks had a backspin to them because they were hitting the canoe and bouncing back off. There was a specific point of there being a backspin. And falling rocks don't have backspins. They have to be thrown to have a backspin on it. And that's one of the things that fascinates me is, okay, well, we all heard about Bigfoot throwing rocks. I mean, that's a common theme, right? But here's my question. How do they throw them? Is it overhand? Is it sidearm? Is it underhand? Those are the little details that get in my head. And that's what I wondered. I don't question existence. I don't question. That's the stuff that I look at, right? Because, like, if we analyze the Patty footage, we see when she turns her whole body because her chin is lower than her shoulders. And that's their morphology, right? If that's the case, they shouldn't be able to throw overhand because their body structure wouldn't allow for their shoulders to do that. Okay.
That's right? A very interesting point.
So then there's that question. Well, then how are we hearing these reports? I have seen a video on YouTube, and I've been trying to find it. I can't find it again. That supposedly showed a Bigfoot throwing rocks. But then in the video, they threw them sidearm, very much like a chimpanzee or another great ape would. And that makes sense if we analyze, like I said, the Patty footage of the body structure. That would make more sense to me as a sidearm throw. So which one is it? We don't know, and we won't know until we gather more data. Those are the details that I look for in my reports. Those are the ones that stick out in my mind as I try and put together a profile and a picture of what these creatures are and how they operate.
Yeah, it's just once you find an answer to one question or you're thinking about one question, so many more come up, just like
Absolutely.
you said. And that's a good question to add to the mix.
Yeah.
Very much so. Very much so. Well, when I've had rocks thrown at me, I didn't see who was throwing them, but I could hear they were little rocks, like that big, maybe the size of a 50-cent piece or a silver dollar. And I could hear them coming through the branches like somebody had lobbed it, but it was hitting the branches coming down. Definitely weren't trying to hit me with it. Right. Because it was too accurate where it was throwing it, like landing 3-4 feet in front of me and bouncing, but never any closer than that.
Did you happen to see the trajectory of the rocks as they were coming in? Were they coming in more? Okay. I've seen a video. I believe it was Christopher Knoll had a video where he was out trying to catch the rocks being thrown at him, and the videos he was getting where the rocks were coming almost straight down at him, instead of across on a horizontal plane.
That's how it seemed like they were I almost envisioned them lobbing them up and they came down through the trees.
Right, so they would have to have a really high arch. and that always fascinates me too. Is that trajectory? So is that going to be a sidearm throw, an overhand throw, or an underhand throw with a really high arch like that?
Or were they up in the tree?
Or were they up in a tree pelting them down on top of you?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yep.
Well, we have to take our commercial break, so stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back with Justin Decker. Awesome. It's already flying past, isn't it?
Right?
Absolutely.
I'll be right back.
Okay.
Jena. Oh, I'm soaking my foot in some water and salt. Yeah.
Yeah, drive me crazy.
Did you have kickboxing today?
Yes. I am testing for my yellow belt next week.
Awesome.
In my younger years, I received my black belt in Taekwondo and Judo.
Yeah.
So I absolutely love the martial arts. Yep.
I love it. I get to beat things up, and it's okay.
Right?
She's team security.
There you go.
Among other things, but she's the tough one. Tammy, I'll let you ask that question when we come back, the ones in the chat room.
Oh, what is it?
Do Bigfoot fashion rocks by napping? I don't know what that is.
I do. I can answer that.
Okay. Tammy will ask you when we come back on the air.
Go.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is the Journey Radio Show. And hey, we're the She-Squatchers. Won't you check us out online at she-squatchers.com? And hey, we are on Facebook and YouTube at She-Squatchers Official. Won't you please like and subscribe to us there and follow us for all the goings on that we're doing? That's the most up-to-date information for us. So right back to the show, we've got Justin Decker with us. And I think Tammy's got a question from the chat room.
Yes, Sherry asks, do Bigfoot fashion rocks by napping?
There has not been any reports that I know of actual tool usage like for rock napping. Napping refers to the process of shaping like the Indians would do with the spearheads and arrowheads, taking another larger, harder rock and chipping it away to shape and fashion them. While I do believe there is some sort of tool usage when it comes to sticks or clubs or stones, nothing that I have ever come across would suggest any type of actual napping or an intentional like reshaping of the rocks.
Interesting.
And do they attach anything to sticks or spears?
I have come across a couple reports of that. They generally go hand in hand with like a Bigfoot seen wearing pelts for some type of clothing. A lot of times those are chalked up as a misidentification or a wild hunter out in the woods, but it's hard to say for sure. There have been a couple reports of them holding something like a spear.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask. I mean, with you looking and studying into all of this and doing all this research into all of these stories and everything, I was going to ask you about how many stories involved them using some kind of tool.
A very small percentage. I couldn't give you an exact number. Most people don't get the chance to observe a lot of activity. But there has been reports of them carrying like a club. So a couple I've read, they're carrying a club and an animal. So the assumption there is it was used as a weapon. I have heard, I think I've read probably about two reports of them using a piece of wood as a club for tree knocking. That's one of the things you hear about there. The people that are thinking tree knocking may not be a wood on one construct. They say there's never been a report. Well, there has been. but they're very few and far between. So I think it's one of the methods they use for making the sounds. But very, very few stories involve anything like any type of tool usage. Unless you start getting into a lot of the Indian lore, and then of course with the Indians seeing the Bigfoot more as another tribe, they tend to bring up things like using weapons or tools in a small fashion.
So
cool.
this is very interesting. I think you've probably read more reports than I have. Have you ever heard of them using fire? Because I've never seen that.
I've never read a report where there was a direct observation of them using fire. I've heard reports of smelling smoke, and then later on there was Bigfoot activity or something like that where people try and tie it together. But I have never come across one of any direct observation of using fire.
Oh, I've got another question here. What about food? With everything you've read, I'm sorry again. Have you heard a lot about Bigfoot being attracted to, say, when people cook out or when they're eating outside?
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually, that's a very common way to supposedly bring them into your campsite. If you're doing a passive investigation, as I call it, there's a lot of researchers out there that prefer just to build a camp and just act normally, and they're trying to bring them in as being curious observers. And I've heard one of the big things is frying bacon, which, I mean, who doesn't love the smell of frying bacon, right?
Right.
And so I've definitely heard of that being used as a way to lure them in, as opposed to going out into their territory and putting them on the defensive.
Do you think that's a large percentage of those stories, or just a few that you remember?
Those are usually like expedition stories that you hear from researchers that are going out, spending a weekend out in the field trying to do stuff. A lot of times they'll have somebody stay at the base and do different things to try and attract attention. But I think with Bigfoot being an opportunistic feeder, anytime there's the idea of an easy meal, they're going to scope it out, especially knowing, as a lot of animals do, humans generally equate food source. The bears up here in Gatlinburg, I mean, that's a big problem. People feed the bears, they associate bears with food, and I think a lot of times Bigfoot is going to do the same thing, especially in areas where there's a lot of human activity. So I can definitely see where the smell of food, or even just hearing a campsite, they're going to know there's food there and they're going to come check it out.
Have you been hearing more stories recently about Bigfoot and coming into towns and making itself known?
I wouldn't say more stories. I mean, there's a lot of stories out there going back the 60s, the 70s, all the way up of Bigfoot raiding dumpsters and trash cans. So I don't think it's happening any more now than it was before. I think maybe more people are taking notice. The Bigfoot phenomenon is really taken off in a lot of areas. It's no longer taboo anymore, right? I remember in my early years, you didn't even talk about it because people just thought you were insane. And nowadays, it's a cultural phenomenon. Here in Gatlinburg, we have restaurants that have Bigfoot themed, and we have stores opening up with the Bigfoot theme. So it's definitely hitting the pop culture. So I just think maybe more people are noticing more, becoming more aware, more interested in sharing their stories about different things like that. Sure.
It is true. I mean, it is. It's so widespread and it's universal, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy how big it's blowing up, and I think it's great. I was never a big fan of some of the Bigfoot TV shows that are out there, but one thing they did do positively was really kind of bring Bigfoot mainstream again, and I think that was an important factor of those shows.
And what about this? And they're bringing science into it too. They're not just, what's that? They're actually using scientific methods to look at that. And not everyone, but I mean, a friend of ours is on a show. And what do you think, Jen? Don't you think they're more scientific now than years before?
I think that they're trying to be, definitely Expedition Bigfoot, they've got a primatologist on there with them, Mariah Mayer, she rocks. Whoop, whoop. But I think definitely they're trying to take more assigned. Well, the technology that is available to us now too is just incredible. I wouldn't give to get my hands on some of the stuff they have, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah.
And I think this season they were down in Kentucky.
They were filming in Harlan County, yes.
Yeah, and I know that you're familiar with that area too.
Yes, very much. So I got a lot of friends up there.
Yeah. So I was like, ooh, I know people are down there.
Yeah, some of
So,
my friends were actually involved in the shooting and the background of it and stuff. So, yeah, it was just definitely something that we were aware was going on. It's kind of a fun thing.
oh, for fun. That sounds like a blast.
Mhm.
Boy, I wonder if we could get them up to Minnesota.
Oh,
There's probably lots of other places they'd rather go first.
I
Yeah.
might come back for that.
Right? Right.
Yes.
Our Tammy has recently moved out to Virginia, but she still travels with us and goes out with us. So
mhm.
we're still all together. It's like we're on the road when we're on the road. 2020 kind of shut us down a little bit, but we're going to be
Well,
back.
and now we get to see each other every week, Wednesdays. So keep listening.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm interested to hear, like, if you researched a lot of the stories that connect Bigfoot to the possibility of these strange lights in the forest or in the water.
You know, I am starting to delve more into that area now. Um, there's a lot of the researchers that I've been following over the years have started realizing there is a lot more to this phenomenon than just the flesh and blood creature. And that's just part of the experience as you get out there and you research and you keep an open mind. There's a lot going on. Um, I know I just recently got some pictures from one of my fellow researchers of eye shine. One was blue, one was red, and the rest of the pictures are pitch dark. And he's going, look, we saw these lights in the woods and we didn't know what was going on. And then we realized it was eye shine. It was their eyes, but there was no outside light source that we could determine. And so that's a big discussion that we've been having is, okay, how is this working with their eyes? What's going on? Is there some kind of bioluminescence going on? Is it typical eye shine? They just are more sensitive due to their larger eyes and more sensitive eyes. And so they can gather more light into their eyes to reflect it. I think a lot of the lights that are being seen could be simply eyes of these creatures watching you. So there definitely is a connection. I know there's a connection with orbs. What the connection is, I don't know. But lights are being seen by researchers while they're experiencing Bigfoot phenomenon. That's the only thing I can say for sure is it's happening.
We've had that happen. We've experienced lights in a big when we were looking for Bigfoot in an area that Bigfoot had been seen. We didn't see Bigfoot, but we saw lights.
Mm-hmm. Now, were they floating lights? Were they lights moving around? Could it have been an eye shine scenario, or what kind of lights are we looking at?
That particular one, we have it on our YouTube channel. It's called Strange
Okay.
Lights. And we were pretty far away because we were looking at a marshy bog, and there was like a set of trees and then another set of trees, and Bigfoot had been seen walking from the one set of trees to the other.
Mm-hmm.
The landowner would not give permission to go out there because it's a marshy bog and it's dangerous. You could fall through and drown, right? So I still wanted to investigate it. So we decided to go out there in the middle of the night. And Jena has this really cool unocular device that can see really far in the dark, really far away. And so we parked along the side of the road and rolled the window down, and she's filming out the window. And so we're as close as we can get to the area, and filming it and looking. She's like looking in the dark, looking to see, is there anything out there?
Right.
And we didn't see any Bigfoot, but all of a sudden these lights came, and I saw them first. And I'm like, Jena, do you see the lights? And she, oh yeah. So at first I thought, hey, could there be a road back behind there somewhere? And I checked. There is not. And there wouldn't have been anybody back there because it's a marshy bog.
Right.
Night, So, you'll just have to check it out and see what you think.
I will. I'll definitely check it out for sure. Being raised in the woods, you see lights out there. I've been out in the woods. I used to deer hunt when I was, my early teens and all that. And you would see lights in the woods. That was just part of being out in the woods. What did it happen all the time? Well, no, of course not, right? But if you're out there and you're quiet and you're listening, you're going to hear things and you're going to see things. That's just experiencing life, right? And I've always wondered, that's maybe that's where the stories of fairies came from, just seeing lights in the woods. Of course, we all know swamp gas and all that, but let's face it, that's not going to be a bright light in the wood, right? That's just an excuse people throw out there because they don't want to expand their minds and actually think about this kind of stuff. So I always, again, anything weird or unusual or not supposed to be there fascinates me. I just think it's amazing.
Well, I'm part Native American, and I've seen what we would call water spirits, which are lights in the water. They can come out of the water and fly through the air too. But they always come out of the water.
Right.
And I've seen those. I have video of that,
Wow.
and I've experienced those, and, know of the teachings, some of the teachings from our tribe about that too. But I didn't know any of that when I first encountered them.
Okay.
So I was like, what is that? Holy cow. Because it came close to me, like arm's length away. It was really close.
Wow.
So, yeah, very, very cool. But, so sometimes when I see things like that, I instantly think water spirit or some types of nature spirit. So I don't necessarily think they're always eye shine.
Right, right. And not saying that they are, but definitely that is one of the things. If you're out experiencing Bigfoot phenomenon, you're hearing them, maybe you're seeing them through the trees. In this specific scenario, these Bigfoot were following this researcher and his team out of the woods. They're essentially escorting them out, and they turned behind, and there were the eyes just staring at them. And so they were able to get off some pictures of it. And again, I'm not one to put names on things. I'm not a big believer in labels because I think labels will automatically make you think of something as opposed to just listening to what the facts are of the story, right? So, you call them the water spirits. To me, they're lights. They could be water spirits. They could be 100 other things. That's just the interpretation. So I try really hard not to put a label on certain things so I can focus on what the story is being told versus the description that we're giving them to help us understand what they are. I do the same thing with my Bigfoot research. People want to throw all these different names out there. And I go, okay, well, that's a cool name, but what's the description? Give me the physical description. Give me the attributes. Give me the behaviors. And then I can kind of classify it from there.
Gotcha.
Very cool.
Well, if I ever meet you in person at an event or something, remind me to show you the video, and I will.
Absolutely. I'm sure we will. I've been invited to speak with Daniel up at the ECBRO coming up here in Virginia.
Oh, we're going to be there.
He's asked me to, yep, that's what I'm saying. He invited me to be a speaker up there this year, so I'm sure we'll have our opportunities.
Yay. Hey, can I ask one more question before we go? I know time is just going, but
Sure.
for people who want to know, since you research all of these documents, what is the best way for people to document their own research of looking for Bigfoot, do you think?
So I think the big thing is to understand the big picture is what's important, right? So where were you, the time of day, what was the weather like? And then any details you can actually come up with. The small details are really what matter. Everybody can say, I saw a large hairy thing walking through the woods, right? But really take the time to think about it and look for colors, smells, anything you can really kind of collect in your memory as to what happened, and write those down as soon as you can. Or better yet, we all got phones. Pull out your phone and record a video, put it on Facebook, something as soon as you can, because those details will get lost the longer you wait to write it down and try and figure them out. That'd be the best thing. If you have an experience, immediately record it as soon as you can, whether an audio recording, a video recording, right? However you can do it to keep those details as fresh as possible, and give as much, even if you don't think it's important information, just put it in there. And you never know who's going to come across that report. The little details can make the difference when we're building a profile of what these things are and how they operate.
Nice. Great answer.
Great answer. And one of the things I hear people a lot of times the forestry people like to say, what you saw was a bear.
Oh.
And I'm telling you, if you pay attention to the arms, bear's arms are going to be up and, they're not going to be hanging down like an ape, so pay attention to the arms and get some details about that, because then you can say, no, it wasn't a bear.
That excuse might work for somebody that's lived in a big city their entire life and has never seen a documentary or never seen a nature video. But I mean, come on, really? Bears have short legs, both front and back. It's to me, that's just a cop out excuse. It's not even a good one, you know.
Yes. Yes. I agree. I agree. So we have like 9 minutes left in the show. Do you have some really cool stories to share that that you found?
Well, I want to get this point across real quick. If you're into this, just be out there and be aware. I was getting my beard trimmed the other day, and I was wearing a gator, right, face mask, because we all have to do that nowadays. And my barber saw it, and it's Bigfoot themed, and he goes, "Hey, I just had a guy in here the other day telling me about a Bigfoot in his backyard." And he said it was beating on his chest and everything. It was just a big Bigfoot in his backyard. And then I had to move on because there was another client there, and I'm going, no, wait, I want to hear the rest of the story. You got to tell me this, right? So just be out there and listen, and you will hear stuff. You know, I'm a restaurant manager, is what I've done for years. I had one of my employees tell me one time, he's like, "Oh, you're into that Bigfoot stuff?" I'm like, "Yeah." You know, my brother was out fishing one night and proceeds to tell me the story of an encounter they had. They're out there and people are experiencing this, you know. This guy was a teenager and he was out fishing, and classic rock throwing territorial behavior scared these country boys away from their fishing hole. Now, I don't know if you all know country boys, but that's kind of a hard thing to do when you're out sitting up trying to catch some catfish at night, to be freaked out enough where you're just going to up and leave, you know, and that's what happened. And it's just hearing the stories from regular people. Those are my favorites. Those are the ones, because then you get the emotion, you get the feeling, and half these people don't even believe what they saw. They're not Bigfoot believers. And so they just go, I don't know what this was, but you might think this is cool.
And they don't tell usually anybody else either.
Yeah, exactly. Those are the best reports to get. Those are the fun ones, you know?
So besides the reports and the research that you've done, that is like, you know, that we're all very well aware of, what are some of your, or what's a favorite story of yours that is not well known?
Oh, not well known. You know, it's hard to say because I don't know what's well known or not for most people, right?
Okay.
So I have one of my favorite stories, because it's one that I don't understand. There was a group of people out doing a nighttime expedition, but it wasn't any like serious researchers, right? There was a couple of serious researchers, but everybody else was out there to have fun and have an experience, kind of like a ghost hunting tour type thing, right? But apparently they came across a very active area. There was a lot of rock throwing. Everybody was feeling threatened. As they were leaving the area, apparently up on this hill, there was a very large Bigfoot, and he got very mad and started hooting and hollering. And apparently somebody responded back. I can't remember if they threw a rock at him or something and engaged him, and he got really mad and started coming down the hill at them. The part that blows my mind and I don't understand is they said his eyes turned red and they were actually glowing and emitting a light, kind of like a flashlight. And I have heard that a couple times, but that was the first time I've heard a story where they saw it happen. They saw the change in the eyes, and then they saw it come out, and then apparently it turned around and retreated and left, and the eyes calmed back down again. That one sticks in my mind because it's completely mind-blowing to me. No clue how to even categorize that. But again, it was somebody's experience, multiple witnesses. I can't discount it. I can't just go, oh, you're lying and making stuff up, right? Because I can't judge that. I don't know. That story just has always stuck in my head and fascinated me. And I'm trying to find the clues that make that logical to me, and I just haven't gotten there yet.
Well, good luck with your exploration and your research. This is exciting. Keep us up to date with these stories too.
Sure, absolutely. Being here in Gatlinburg, I just got here a few months ago. I'm working on getting myself out there and trying to collect more local stories and trying to get more stuff going on here. So hopefully I'll end up getting a lot more fresh new reports from the area, because really there's a ton of activity here, not a lot of research going on here as far as real serious collection of research.
So are you looking for this information just to satisfy your own curiosity, or are you going to write a book? Or
Well, I have been encouraged to write books. I'm still working on it. If I can, mostly it's for me because I just love knowledge. I love knowing. But at the same time, if I know something, why not put it out there and postulate it as my theories, you know? So there probably will be some books coming up in the future. I have some ideas already as kind of a way to start and kind of break into it and then go from there with some of my own original work.
Wonderful. So before we came on the show, you were telling us your viewpoint on out there stories and stories that other people might not believe and what you were thinking about those types of things. Would you share that
Sure,
with the
absolutely.
listeners?
I try not to peg any of these holes into my personal views. I take them for what they are. I do have limits to my belief. I'll put it that way. I've heard some stories that to me are just too fantastical. They're just way too far out there. They're great stories, and they make great movies and great radio shows, but I just don't see any reality to them at all on any spectrum, right? But at the same time, I have some very good friends that are researchers, and they are convinced of a lot of these things going on. The mind speak, telekinesis, human speech, culture, and all these things. And I have to look at those and go, look, do I believe this person or not? Do I believe their experiences or not? And could there be a basis to these? And with not knowing what these creatures are, where they come from, what the background is on them, I can't discount those. And so I equally listen to and judge and evaluate those stories as I do the farmer that sees one crossing the road with nothing crazy going on. I believe that everybody out there doing research and their experiences has a piece of the puzzle. I think there's more to these creatures than we know. And I have to listen to everybody, and that's how you can start putting some puzzle pieces together. I don't believe in this whole faction thing, these camps of, they're pure ape. All they are is an ape. Or these other people that go, these are shamans from the old times, and we can sit with them and learn religion. Those are two very far into the spectrums, and I believe the truth is somewhere in the middle, but I believe there's elements of truth in all the stories. So it's a matter of kind of putting it all together and finding out what's going on.
That's very good. I like that. I actually talk about puzzle pieces too. Like it's a huge puzzle. Somebody threw away the box. We don't know what the picture looks like. So we just have to gather the information until it starts to fit together. And when it's put together, we won't have to worry about the stuff that the puzzle pieces that are left over.
Exactly.
It'll work itself out. It will. It will.
Yep.
All right. Well, this is the end of the show. I want to give the people the opportunity to know how to find you. Will you please tell them?
Sure. I don't have any research pages set up. Just look for me on Facebook, Justin Decker. I'm in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. If you're on any of the Facebook groups for Bigfoot stuff, you can find me in most of them somewhere along the line. I've been on a few different podcasts. You can find me on there. Paranormal Roundtable is a real popular one right now with Josh Turner. I have just been asked to help co-host with the roundtable on the Skookum sessions, which you can find them on YouTube. There's a group of 5 or 6 of us, and every week we get together and talk about stuff like this and just kind of what we do. So just look me up on Facebook and feel free to shoot me a message. You guys want to see pictures of the jungles? I have 3 albums of my life growing up on my Facebook page. Feel free to check them out. Shoot me any questions. I'm a wide open book. Whatever you guys want to talk about, I'm there. I'm free to answer questions and just have fun.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for coming on the show tonight, Justin. We'll hope to have you on again sometime. And thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next week. Good night.
Bye. Bye.